Okay, look at that. Do you see all those hearts coming in, Rita?
Yeah, okay. Hello.
That's everybody who's excited to see you.
Okay. Can I heart back?
You can't, but you can. We can do these kind of hearts.
These kind of hearts. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so Jen Holman's in here and Libby, and you can see their names right up here.
Yes, too bad. I've got these old eyes. Let me try to see those names.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Julie's going to be in charge of reading questions today for more than one reason.
Yeah. Hi, Alicia and Chantel and Live and Dream and Mama and Tristan and Lisa. Woohoo!
Yeah,
all right. Well, I'm going to explain who I am. You all keep streaming in. Hey, Suzanne Barrett. She's one of our teachers.
Hi,
Remember
Suzanne?
Suzanne?
Yes,
yeah. Heather and Hannah from the Alliance. Woo! Yeah, if you're an Alliance member, always let us know that. We like to hear that. So wonderful. Glad you guys are all here. Hey, Raquel. Yes, she's new to Periscope, a newbie over here.
Sorry.
No, it's wonderful. It's adorable. We do send our hearts back, and it's great to see you all coming in. Hey, Sarah, Holly from HSA. Yay, from the Homeschool Alliance. Good. So here's what you can do if you're new to Periscope. Yeah, we have people from all over the world. Someone from Switzerland just emailed me this morning. So here's what you can do. You can share this broadcast if you feel like somebody would benefit from hearing about copywork and working memory. Rita is a specialist who works with kids who have language difficulties all the time, and she's going to drop some knowledge bombs on you. So,
try not to do that.
So here's what you want to do. Swipe right on the iPhone, up on the Android, and do followers just like Faith and Alicia and Rack Segment and Chantel are doing right now. Thanks, you guys. Very good. Hey, Audria. Wonderful. So, how many of you were on my retreat scope this morning? Did you see that we have our retreat information posted? If you did, thumbs up. Otherwise, go back and you can watch the replay on Periscope or Catch. Yes, good. Well, guess what? This is my friend Rita Cevasco, and she's going to be at the retreat. Say hi, Rita.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for being here. I'm really excited to talk to everybody today.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. That's perfect. So, Rita, why don't we start by having you, I have to turn off sounds on my computer.
Okay.
How about we start with you sharing about your kids, your homeschool experience, and your background.
Okay, well, I am a mother of 3 grown children, age 25 down through 19. 2 of them have graduated from college, one's in grad school, so they're far along on the journey. So I am now kind of a answer when needed mom. And that's a new experience for me, but I am also a speech and language therapist, and I work with kids who have primarily reading and writing difficulties. They can have language weaknesses as well, or just specifically dyslexia or dysgraphia, if you've heard of those things. And I've been doing that. I've been a therapist since you'll know how old I am now, since 1984, and I have been specializing in reading and writing since 1990.
Oh my gosh.
And let's see, I came to Brave Writer when I was homeschooling my own kids, and that was about 14 years ago, I figured, and about maybe 10 years ago or more, I started teaching some classes with you.
Right.
And I came to Jolie and said, wow, your ideas are not only fabulous with my own kids, but I'm using them with my students as well, and they really work. And here's some of the reasons why. And now there's even more research that supports why this is working.
Yes.
So I think that's important to know.
And look at that. Someone's using the wand this year with a struggling reader, and they love it.
Good, good. I appreciate that. That was my first attempt to take all this stuff and try to put it on paper. And sometimes, that can be hard to get down the way I want it, but...
Oh, you did a great job, but it was a project that nearly killed us both.
I've had a few years of recovery.
Yeah, endless hours of work.
Right.
And just so you know, Rita, look here to make eye contact. This is where the camera is. Yeah, just so you know, sorry. I forgot to tell you that. Okay. We got to get her up to speed on the old Periscope deal.
I'm not...
No, it's good.
I'm kind of, old school in that I'm always working with kids and not broadcasting.
Right.
So that's where I am.
Well, that's okay. No, we're so great to have you here today. So what we're going to do for all of you who are on our scope, and thank you, there's a lot of you tuned in today. we're going to have Rita share a little bit about what working memory is, that portion of the brain, what is that function, and then how Copywork is effective in expanding your working memory capacity. Am I getting that right?
Yep, you got it.
Perfect.
Okay.
So here's how we're going to do it. She'll talk. I'm going to read and I'm going to jot down your questions so she can talk uninterrupted. And then I'll be sort of like, talk show host. I will feed her your questions. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. All right, Rita, take it away.
Okay. Well, a number of years ago, Cindy, who works for Brave Writer, and I were talking, and she said, that Copywork, that really works. I don't know why, but it really works. And I just laughed because over the years, more and more, I'm understanding why, researchers are understanding why, and a lot of it has to do with this idea of working memory. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And some of what I'm sharing with you today, actually, I just got back from the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association's convention in Denver, which was in November, and there were some presenters. I feel a need to give you their names: Basher, Montgomery, Gilliam, and Singer. In my field, you always have to say
you should.
It's all good. And they were talking about working memory, and I just was laughing the whole time, thinking, you guys need to know about Copywork and dictation because you're trying to figure it out, and Jolie's been doing it for years. So that's why we're here talking. Okay, so a lot of you may have heard about the concepts of short-term memory or long-term memory, and then how is that different from working memory? And really what we have here is researchers beginning, the neuroscientists beginning to rethink the way the brain works. And they've created some models around this idea that it takes memory to have a space in our cognition. And cognition being our thinking, our brains, right? Our thinking selves. That's not just about storing information, but about how do we reason? How do we understand concepts? And we have to be able to hold information in a place while we are manipulating it and learning it and adding into our long-term memory. And that place they call working memory.
So let me see if I've got this right. And let's see if you guys are following along. And if you have questions, it's perfectly fine to ask them. Would working memory be similar, I hope you know this word, to RAM on a computer, where it is storing enough capacity to manage the operations of the brain?
Yes, and sometimes one analogy that one of the researchers from a number of years ago said is, he said it's almost like everything that's on your screen.
Okay.
So what's stored is your long-term memory. Your now I don't know what the computer term is for this, but we have this model that also includes the capacity. Okay, the capacity of your computer, and also how, kind of its support system, how quick is it to boot up and all that. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here today.
Super.
So we have a little model here that I was going to have you show them.
Oh, yes. So here, do you have your copy so you can say what it is? All right, take some screenshots because Rita is going to explain this model, okay? And this is, what is it called, Rita?
It's Baddeley's working memory model. And if you Google image that word, Baddeley is spelled Badddeley.
Right. And this model is what she's going to talk about. And what it will do, the reason I like sharing brain research and sharing data with you is you're trying to be educators. And sometimes you're busy working with a tool that if you just understood, oh, here, thanks for saying that. There, is that better? It's closer. If you understood how the brain works, you would be able to implement more effectively. How's that? Okay. Don't worry. She's going to say all these words. So that's just something you can look up this guy and you'll find it in Google Images. Okay. So try that. All right. Go ahead, Rita.
Okay. So at the top of that model, if you couldn't read what it was, you saw there was an oval. You might want to periodically point.
Okay. So she's talking about this now.
That's called the central executive. Now, I want you to understand, when it comes to brain ideas, researchers are trying to figure it out, and they come up with a model, and then there's more research, and then they modify a model. So I don't want you to feel like everything that's talked about is written in stone. This is the understanding and the model that people like the best right now. And of course, language therapists like it the best, and soon you'll know why. But your central executive, some of you might have heard the term executive functioning skills as related to attention or attention deficit disorder. We all have these executive skills that are manager skills, right? And it has a lot to do with how we direct attention to a task, how we understand, how we are able to figure out as we're learning a concept, how we can direct our best energy toward that, okay? And we all have this executive skill, and if you have a child who has attention deficit issues, they're going to have problems at this level. Okay.
So can you give an example of what it looks like when a person's using it effectively?
Yeah, I have one right here.
Oh, perfect.
So our executive skills help us give our attention. Some of it's kind of semi-automatic, and some of it is very directed and kind of we have this cognitive override, like I really need to pay attention to this. So just on Sunday, I'm in the car driving. My husband is in the passenger seat. I'm talking. I'm driving, right? In automatic, semi-automatic, I know my car has to be in a lane, right? That's something that's for us drivers. We are not giving a lot of attention to that. All of a sudden, the road is literally covered in debris. I have to stop talking, and I am now directing all my attention to how I maneuver this car and deal with my lane. So we have this, and driving is a great example of that. And also, that takes us to the next part of this, which is multitasking, which is, in the hot seat right now, because so many kids who are involved in social media while doing homework and doing work, and can we multitask? And part of what researchers think is that we're not really multitasking, we're switching attention. And our executive control helps us switch attention.
And we can do it more or less rapidly depending on...
Yes, and that was a perfect example of attention switching. And that's why we say, don't talk on the phone while you're driving, because all your primary attention is now going toward talking and not toward driving, and you might go through a red light.
Let me ask you this. I also know we've all had the experience of driving and suddenly miles go by and you realize you don't remember ever looking at the road.
You're in semi-automatic, right? And your brain, probably you were thinking of other things and you're giving your attention to these other things.
But you can continue, it's like almost like an unconscious part of you can still navigate the road. Right? Is that like automatic? Is that where we're going here?
That's where we're talking about how our executive skills, we're monitoring. Our brain is doing a lot of monitoring that we don't know about. And that's really important about writing, because you are an adult, you are a writer. There is all kinds of processes behind you being able to write that you no longer really are thinking about.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
And because a lot of them have gotten into this skill consolidation, which is what we're talking about. Okay? So just to recap. Central executive, that's where our attention is sustained. We can switch attention, and it requires some cognitive effort. Okay? Got that? So the next part of this is the part I really love.
Okay.
Which is...
I'm on duty here. I'm Vanna.
Phonological loop.
Phonological loop. If someone wants to type that into the comments for everybody.
Yes.
Phonological.
Phono is a Greek-based word meaning sound.
Yes. Right.
The logia or log
is word.
Yes, it means like, a study of, the concept of, So this is this part of our brain that's in charge. Good job. Phonological loop. Okay. Now, the phonological loop, just so you know, is this management system. I like to think of phonology in general as like our wireless internet system that is connecting, that connects your phone, your tablet, your computer, your printer, right? It's doing it all like simultaneously, wirelessly. That's what sound in our brain does for us with our whole language system. So our entire language system.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so... What the theorists think is that all this information goes through this phonological loop. It has to be managed because concepts as humans, concepts have a language structure to them.
Yes.
You know, even visual concepts have their language piece, but
Yes.
but we have a place for the visual things too. But so, and actually neuroscientists now can do these functional MRIs where they have people do tasks and they look at where the blood flows, and guess what? It flows to this area that's kind of behind my left ear. That's the parietal temporal area of the left
Oh
side
my
of
God,
the
you
brain.
just went right over my brain.
Yes, well, guess what? As a neurologist, I'm like, but it's right here, okay?
Okay.
And that's this area in the brain that they know when we do any kind of language task, things need to be going through this loop. It's part of the way science has changed theory because brain science has so much more to it technologically, okay?
Okay.
So this is cool. This is also an area, I'm going to use Jolie as my example here, an area that even if you have average skills, you're going to be on a continuum in your phonological loop. And if you have weaker phonological loop skills, learning a second language is going to be harder for you. So, I'm really verbal. I'm very Italian. I talk with my hands, blah, blah, blah. I'm a speech and language therapist. You'd think that my phonological loop would be fabulous.
Yeah.
But mine is actually not so great. And when I took Spanish, it was actually quite hard for me. And you speak two other languages. So we can guess that her phonological loop is probably pretty darn strong. So you can have this range of skills, but it's a primary part of working memory, and it's the most studied aspect of working memory. Yes.
Okay.
And that's good for us because we're talking about reading and writing. Reading and writing is all about language. So there is a researcher named Virginia Berninger, and she has this wonderful phrase that she uses that we have language by mouth, talking, language by ear, listening, language by eyes, reading, language by hand, writing.
Oh, say those again. That was fabulous.
Okay, hey, she doesn't do
Yeah.
well enough. Okay.
Okay, so listen to these four because this is very simple
She
and
talks
clear.
about how we have this language system, and we have our language by mouth, which is our talking, language by ear, listening, language by eyes, reading. It's important to have that sense that reading is a process that's learned on top of our underlying language system. Language by hand is writing.
And
they all inform each other.
Yes.
But initially, we're biologically programmed for learning to, we're listening as neonates, right?
Yes.
You know, as we're the fetus is listening. We have so much evidence about that. Young newborns will react differently to sounds from their native language than sounds from other languages, right?
Yeah.
So, and then they begin to speak. We actually are programmed for that.
Yes, that's right.
Reading and writing, not true, but that's a discussion for another day. Okay?
But so, just to recap, so she mentions these four ways of receiving language. And if you've listened
Using
to my...
language,
or
too.
using language,
Right.
yes. So, if you've been around Brave Writer at all, or you've been on my scopes, what I want you to think about is all the various portals. We tend to think very exclusively about pencil on paper or discriminating words, but there is a whole language piece that is happening when we are looking at visual images or when we're listening to Audible and a book on CD or we're having a conversation. So language development encompasses a bigger volume of inputs than just reading and writing, right?
Right. And so just to recap, our phonological loop allows us to engage in articulatory rehearsal. This is called Periscope. This is called Periscope. This is called Periscope, right? Okay, you know, something. I'm just picking something. Something I want to remember. I can rehearse it. That helps me remember.
Okay.
We need it for our short-term memory.
She mentions
storage.
music. Is music a part of that?
Of the phonological loop?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say anything, a lot of the aspects of sound in phonology has to do with prosody and tones and clearly accenting a word. You see a new reader who's reading a multi-syllable word. It doesn't sound like a real word until they figure out which syllable to stress. You know? So all of these aspects. But remember, music also can have aspects in the right side of the brain skills too.
Okay.
music is thought of as a second language. So that's something else to remember too. Just so you know, when I talk about short-term memory, an abbreviation for that is STM or ST memory, working memory, just because we'll have some stuff for you to look at, and some of those abbreviations will be there. Working memory is often abbreviated WM. Long-term memory is often abbreviated LTM or LT memory. Can you turn the camera so it is landscape?
It is landscape. It might be that you haven't updated your Periscope, but it is in landscape mode right now. So these are those acronyms that she had. STM for short-term memory, WM for working memory, LTM for long-term memory. Okay? All right, go ahead.
I won't talk in acronyms, but just in case you see it written elsewhere when you're looking around. Just so you know, the phonological loop has a lot to do with vocabulary development, and isn't that something we all talk about all the time? Okay. Cool. If you remember in our model, there was the visual spatial sketch pad.
Okay, so these are all parts of the brain that we're talking about right now.
This is our mental workspace. It's, this is another part of our working memory. Just remember, these are models. This, when we are doing tasks that require this, the blood flow is going more to the right side of the brain. This is for those types of tasks that don't rely on language so much. The puzzle kinds of tasks, or I like to think even in terms of some of the when you think about how you set up an outline, like I think you're starting to use some of those same kinds of skills. You're meshing your skills together. I'm creating an outline. I know exactly how I want that to look. I'm trying to think in terms of this. Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't tell you about that.
Yeah,
yes.
I agree.
Just so you know, there's another thing called an episodic buffer. It's just kind of the thing that buffers, right? It works between, my son says his spins round and round like the buffers on our TVs and computers. This is just kind of a place where we access long and short-term memory.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
All right. So it's our link, but here's the thing about the buffer. It helps us chunk and bind information. Now.
Okay.
That's bunch theory.
It is.
How'd you like that?
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So deep breath. Ready? This is all easily re-listened to if you're interested.
Yes.
Rita's laying a foundation for how it's going to make a difference to understand this in Copywork. And now that's coming.
Okay. Because we do a lot of things. It's very easy as a homeschooler to think it's all about the workbook. It's all about the task. But what we need to think about is that it's the strategy. I'm really looking for the kind of learning that's happening. And is this important? And is that not important? And, if I don't finish that page, does it matter? So I like for you to know that Jolie's ideas have research behind them to support them. I see the difference daily. And when you feel like, some people will say to me, well, why do Copywork? I don't need to do it with that child because they do it so easily. Okay. Well, they read easily. Do they still read? I mean, things are still gained. Yes. Right? Even when it's easy. In fact, you could argue that you gain more skill when it's easy, and if you're drowning, you're not gaining a lot of skill.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, who remembers me saying that? I have said on the Alliance countless times.
I didn't know she said that.
Here's what I've said on the Alliance countless times. That joy is the best teacher. Mm-hmm. That when you feel proficient and competent, that's when you are gaining the most sense of confidence in your learning skills. In other words, our tendency is to think learning's only happening if we're unhappy and working hard.
Right.
Whereas sometimes the best learning is happening in that practice, in that feeling of being skillful. You learn to ride a bike, you keep falling off. That's not the most meaningful part of bike riding. It's when you can ride away and now you can go up and down hills and you can turn corners.
Exactly.
And suddenly you get better at it, and then you think, oh, maybe I want to be in a biking race. Your skills actually accelerate because now you have like this foundation that is automatic. So what Rita's talking about here with Copywork is something that's got a long-term value. And I've shared before, my kids still keep notebooks of quotes that they love. Some of them do it digitally, but they have developed a relationship with the value of Copywork. It's not just a strategy to get good at handwriting. All right, keep going.
I hit a button, didn't I?
Yeah, good.
Okay, just to summarize, what does this mean for Copywork? Just some basic principles that the research tells us. That we can handle in our working memory 4 chunks of information. And the job of working memory is to be manipulating chunks in order to learn concepts, right? So we have to have it happening simultaneously. You can't have the grammar book separate from the vocabulary book, separate from
Spelling.
the handwriting book or whatever. You can have some of that if you want. But if you're not really working on consolidating it and helping skills to become so automatic that they get chunked in big chunks together, right?
Yes.
Then you're not going to be able to get to those deeper levels.
Yes.
You're back to, you've had new drivers. Anyone
Yes.
who's had teenagers has
Yes.
had new drivers. The first time you get in a car with them, you think, oh my gosh, I had no idea that actually just backing out takes so much knowledge. That
Yes.
has been consolidated into such automatic information. But when you're sitting on the passenger side with a brand new driver, you are aware of all these pieces that need to be learned and need to be consolidated and chunked so that they can pay attention to what's on the road in front of them.
No,
right?
that's perfect. Someone said, so are you saying Copywork is the tool then that helps to bind them? And that is exactly what we're saying.
Right.
Exactly.
And there's
what a softball question.
Intentional.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You are just doing it for
foundations
us.
class, I literally called it, and it's what I'm going to talk about
Yes.
at the retreat,
Yes.
is intentional
Copywork.
What does it mean to have intentional copywork, intentional dictation?
Exactly.
What does that look like?
Because what we're talking about, so I'm going to give a quick analogy while she gets her next notes ready. So when I've talked about spelling, I've talked about it this way. You might do a spelling list where your child learns like a certain set of sounds, let's say the IGH, okay? And so you have a whole list of those words, and your child learns the rule behind how to spell, they learn the list, you give the test, they get it all right. They sit down now to do a free write, and suddenly they're misspelling all these IGH words, and you can't figure out why.
Right.
Here's the reason.
Perfect example.
They have not bound the IGH spelling to a context that has meaning. So when they shift the brain over and they're focused now on generating meaning, which is creating original writing, original thought, the spelling has never integrated with that part of the way the brain thinks. Mm-hmm. And so the spelling goes out the window. They prioritize the meaning. But if you are copying and binding the meaning to the spelling, when they go to original writing, that's more available. Will it be available 100% flawlessly? No.
Not right away.
Not right away. But this is why we use these practices to slowly, as you use that great word, bind them together. Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead.
Okay, and I didn't come up with that phrase myself, but yes,
I like that.
It's a good one.
No, you've used
yes,
it.
Yes.
Okay. Right. It's a very good one.
The other thing so part of what we have to talk about here is we know that working memory is a biological given.
Okay.
Okay, it's a biological given. And by the way, the research does not support all these programs out there to do this task over and over on the computer and you'll increase your memory. You do improve on that task, but it doesn't generalize to other memory. The scientists do believe that working memory is a biological given. But we can enhance what we learn, and we can work within our memory.
Our capacity.
Our capacity. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. We can work within that.
Okay, good.
All right. Now, I'm going to give you an example. We'll make Julie our guinea pig. Some of you might be able to answer this. Okay.
Woo-hoo.
I am going to read a somewhat complex sentence. Okay.
Oh, no.
And I want you to just tell me what I was talking about.
Okay.
Okay?
All
Based on this sentence. Are you ready?
I'm
Okay?
trying.
So we're going to look at how well she binds it all together. Okay?
I did not know this was coming.
No, I didn't tell
So
you.
now I'm in panic mode.
Yes,
All right, go ahead.
It's not that hard. Okay. Realistically, Because he had repeatedly experienced real combat, he could expect to react in fear every time he heard an alarm.
All right. So I'm thinking in his daily life or in his real life, not his imagined life, he is going to react when he hears an alarm because he's had other bad experiences prior.
Right. And what kind of person do you picture here?
A nervous person, somebody who is scares at small noises or
right.
noises.
And do you picture a male or a female?
A boy.
Because I said
he.
He, right?
Oh.
Okay.
Well, good.
When I said the word combat.
Yes.
What did that trigger?
That triggered the imagination of the military or a fight or
right.
the police,
so,
something.
So you might be thinking this guy has
PSTD.
Someone said
PTSD
that.
already
PTSD.
said.
Sorry, I said that wrong.
Right.
STD is what I almost said.
No,
PTSD
PTSD for the military. Yes, exactly.
Right. Yes, not STD. Sorry.
Right.
Okay. And I want you to notice that I use the word real and realistically.
I noticed that.
Okay, realistic has the base word real.
Yes.
You know that. It triggers the meaning, the concept of real. If you notice, I used what I like to call, because I'm all about function, the past.
Okay.
I don't really care when I work with my students who are struggling what had is called. What I really care about is that if it says he had repeatedly, I'm talking about the past before, right?
I
want
that.
my kids to know that. I want them to know the function of grammar. And then, because I said he could expect to react, you know I'm talking future. Because we know what infinitives are, okay? I use the word expect and experience, and we're familiar with some of these word structures.
Yeah.
You would know how to spell those words. I mean, there's grammar, there's semantics,
yes.
There's world knowledge,
yes.
long-term memory. You know, those of you who immediately thought combat, that's why I picked that, obviously, in case you wondered why. Well, she's like, that was kind of negative. Well, I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be something that would really provoke some thought. Oh, combat, and he reacts to alarms, and I know something about that. I've heard about it before.
No, and you know what's fascinating? So because I was unprepared for this moment, I panicked. Yeah. I found my brain go blank. I was like, I felt tested. And I thought, oh, my friends are on Periscope are going to think I'm stupid.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, this is, don't you think this is valuable?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that what our kids feel? Mm-hmm. Like, uh-oh, I'm on the spot. And like, I could read this and get it just fine. But having to listen and retain.
Yeah. But she has a good phonological loop system, so I wasn't worried about her.
No, but I will tell you this. This is not always true for me, though. Here's what's hard for me. So like if someone gives me a number, like let's say they give me a phone number, mm-hmm. I literally can only hold 2 or 3 digits at mm-hmm. a time. Mm-hmm. And when you give me a longer, complicated sentence and I'm supposed to feed it back, I do find it hard to hold on to the whole thing. Right. Now, if you had just been reading to me and I was relaxed mm-hmm. and I didn't have to produce anything,
yeah, right.
I would have remembered it better.
Right.
Anyway, that's just, to remind you that if adults go through that, how much more your
yes.
kids when you put them on the spot to narrate on command.
Yeah,
right? You all know what I'm talking about.
Right. And my point here is part of what working memory does.
Okay.
Is works on helping us store while gleaning meaning.
Oh, okay.
So we're back to why is copywork important? I mean, we want kids ultimately to be gleaning meaning,
yes.
right? And to be able to produce original meaning.
Yes.
And we've got to get a whole bunch of skills consolidated, bound, working simultaneously.
Yes.
And that's really, I call it getting things to automaticity.
Right.
And working simultaneously. That on those simultaneous processes, that's really what it's all about. So that's yes. what's really cool. Okay?
Awesome.
I already told you that. All right. So we were talking, do you want to tell them about the little...
Oh, sure. Yes. Where is it? Yeah. So Rita put together for everybody a little, here's what the cover looks like.
It's a little bit fast and dirty, I just want to tell you.
It's 5 principles to help grow working memory. And I made a little, where did I put that, Rita? Oh, here it is. You can download this from the website, bravewriter.com/copywork. free 5 tips for working memory and copywork. So take a quick screenshot, and then afterwards, or even if you have your computer, she did this. This is for free. It is not the most beautiful layout. I had no time. So forgive me for it being straight
got a
up.
tiny bit of jargon in it.
And it's got some jargon in it, and I did my best to fix it for you. But I didn't even know what all of it meant. So, like, she's, she's talking from this very sciencey place. But this is free. So go get it and sign up, and then that way you'll have some of these principles, and you can go back and think about it. All right, go ahead, Rita.
So the first is really accepting the fact that you and your children only have so much capacity. There's only so much capacity. That's how we all are. And our goal in life is to figure out how best do we think, how best do we learn, and to help figure out how we can aid ourselves. Okay? And so that's the one thing. It's just to really kind of accept your child where they are. Now, it doesn't mean there's not a whole lot we can do to help that.
Right.
But I think when you have that sense that, yeah, my child's brilliant at this. I can hand them anything and they can do that. Isn't that cool? Well, yeah. And then this one, hey, he's okay, and this one, a little worried about this one's working memory.
Yeah.
The other thing I want you to know is a lot of people misinterpret working memory for attention. And you'll hear people say, it just doesn't really feel like ADD, but it's something. And that's really important to know. Oh, someone put up my website.
Yeah.
That's really important to know because, you'll go to a support person and say, can you help me? And they say, oh, it must be ADD. Well, guess what? Sometimes it's not. And I think that's really important to know.
It is important to know.
The next thing, though, is that we can functionally help increase capacity by working toward automaticity. We doing okay?
Yes.
Okay. So we need skills to become like the driving skills. We need them to become invisible. Okay?
Okay, so she used the word automaticity. That means automatic. Right? It's like the difference between a stick shift and the automatic on your car. We're using a lot of car analogies.
Yeah, we are.
But automatic means you don't consciously think about what you're doing. I type automatically. But when I was first learning to type, I had to think about every finger, every single keystroke, right? Because I didn't know where the letters were and I didn't know the shift key. So yes, invisible is good too. And one of the things that I've shared a lot about writing when I've instructed parents who are teaching kids, your own process, for those of you who are natural writers, is so ingrained in you, it's invisible to you.
Yeah.
You don't realize the systematic way that you are addressing language.
And how much cognitive effort your children may have just in that. Just to indent. Now we don't even notice that we've indented.
Oh, great point.
It's a perfect example of it. I mean, you see it, you're doing copywork, you indent, you haven't even, that has not even hit those higher levels of thought. That's that automatic attention that we were talking about, because you're looking more at the text, and I need to say, remember this 5-word phrase of this long sentence because I'm going to copy it. You're really looking at that, and you're probably processing meaning. That idea of indenting and capitalizing and all of that. It's just, where are you on the line? How about that? Are you on the line? How many of us still have kids who are working on keeping their letters anchored to the line?
No, totally. And so often I have a parent who will say something like, she never capitalizes, but I know she knows how. And that's an example of not yet being at automaticity. She understands cognitively that a capital comes at the beginning of a sentence and follows a period. But when you are working on it day to day to day, and it's not automatic, you forget.
Right.
It's not that you can't be quizzed and get the right answer. It's that it's not easy for you.
Right. And your copy work, your children's copy work can help you know what you would expect in their original writing.
Oh, that's good.
If they're still struggling with indenting and copy work,
you're not going to
hold
see
them
it.
accountable
Yeah.
for that in their original writing.
Exactly.
Because the cognitive task of originating ideas and getting it down, I liken it to carrying a bunch of boxes.
Yes.
You add now that you have to create.
Yes.
You've added a whole bunch of boxes now, right? Now spelling is really important, and
yes.
you know, your grammar is important, and your word choice, and I have this idea, and how's it organized? I'm carrying so many boxes, I'm going to drop some of them.
Oh, I love that. Did you guys get that? It's like I'm carrying all these boxes. I'm going to drop some of them. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I don't know if you guys felt it, but like I had a whoosh go through me. No, because I've tried to conceptualize these things, and that one really works for me. I mean, because I can feel that. You can say that to your kids. And when we talk about how to help your children, it's good to talk to them about their own brains. To say, look, you've got a lot going on in your brain right now, and you want to drop some of these boxes. I'm only going to hold you accountable for these 2 boxes that we know you can carry. And if you happen to throw in a capital now and then, high five, we're proud of you. Like, part of it is recognizing when they start to take on more and incorporate it after they've shown that it's really challenging for them. Right. Because this is a growing skill set. This isn't like it comes prepackaged or that understanding equals execution. Right? Those are not the same thing, are they?
And
okay.
Yeah, you have to get automaticity. And one of the things, the theory is that you have to help free up resources. Well, think about Copywork. What resources have you freed up? You freed up spelling. It's in front of them.
Oh, there you go.
Right? There's one you freed up. Now, getting it down, you know, what you're looking at.
The letter to letter, right.
Yeah, that could be another issue. But in general, you've freed up some resources. You freed up the resource of having to create.
Yes, the original thought is not required.
Right. You freed up the punctuation issue. You freed up a lot of resources for them. They can practice skills without having to practice everything.
That's great.
And that's why it's so beautiful, honestly. The freeing up of resources and getting to automaticity, consolidating, those things are, you know, you just cannot believe how much goes on. It's like Cindy said. I'm not really sure why it works, but it sure does work. Yeah. And that's really true.
Well, and somebody just said, so do you point out all their mistakes? Let's see here. Oh, does the hand hurting after 10 words of copywork count in the automatic? Yes. I mean, if 10 words is tiring, 10 words is tiring. I mean, we tend to think, oh, well, it shouldn't be. Therefore, he's not telling the truth. But maybe he is. I know Charlotte Mason often says short lessons. Your goal is for them to give full attention and to execute excellently. So if that falls off after 10 words, they should stop, because it creates a sloppiness of attention and it brings them down. They stop enjoying what they're doing and they don't produce the same level of skill when they are doing a half effort. So I'm all about Charlotte Mason on that one. I don't know what you think about that.
And you just skipped to number 5, which was fine.
Oh, sorry about that.
Which is that you reduce the content demands.
Yes.
That's exactly what you're talking
isn't it?
about.
Right.
Julie talks about setting a timer. For some kids, you know, it could be 10 minutes. For some kids, it could be 2 minutes. What I talk a lot about is looking for errors and having that help you see what's happening. So if there's this reduction in attention,
yes,
and you start seeing more errors, I just kind of picked up this idea in my head, and you know, this is not based on, you know, thousands of subjects that have been run in research, but I think that if you can have 3 or less errors in copywork, you're probably at a pretty good working level. And if you start seeing more than that, that content, either the level of reading involved, you didn't read beforehand, which could always be a problem.
Yes.
You know, is it too long? Is the vocabulary too much? Were there a lot of multisyllabic words there? There's a lot going on. Were they too emotional that day? But I'm not talking just one day. You know, you're going to have a bad day. But I'm talking looking over the course of your child's copywork. If there's a lot of mistakes, you need to back way up. You're not getting to automaticity. You're not learning how to swim when you're drowning. Right?
Right.
If you're drowning, that's not what we want. For dictation, I say I like to see no more than 5.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I say 5 to 7.
5 to 7.
And I was going to say this. So about this, do you point out all their mistakes? We'll talk about typing and handwriting in a second. The pointing out of mistakes is, for me, not quite the right language. In other words, if we see what they're doing as progress towards automaticity in the handwriting and copying and, grammar and punctuation, if we see it as moving in that direction, then it's not a mistake. We wouldn't say a child falling off a bike learning to ride it made a mistake. That's not how we see it. We see progress. We say, oh, she stayed on all the way off the driveway. So what you're looking for actually is proficiency. How successful was this child with this piece of writing in matching it up? And in Brave Writer, we give you ideas for how to coax growth. We don't just point out and say, you missed the capital. We say things like, take this piece that you just finished. We take some time in between handwriting it and then looking at it. And we say, now, can you go word by word and see if you can make sure it all matches? So they go back through and they make the connection, right, as opposed to you going in and saying 6 mistakes. And if they miss some of them, because it's a lot to look at and a lot to compare, you can say things like, how about we look at just this word? Or, did you check all the capitals? Or, are you satisfied with your indentations? In other words, you're helping the child gain ownership over this process and analyze effectively. And that leads to growth as opposed to shame. Okay.
Right. And I tell kids, trust me, the wand, Jolie was my editor. Everybody needs an editor, right? Everybody only knows this much, and there's always someone else who knows this much, right? Yeah. So I say to kids, okay, here's your job. Your job is to go through and make that match. See what you can find. And then if you don't find things, then I'm going to give you hints. Like, there's a difference.
Exactly.
Like, okay, look at the second line. Oh, it's an organization problem. We'll talk about that, which for some children, I kind of use that word like they need more space between their words, So there's these various things that we do that help them become a good editor. Isn't that part of what we want? We don't want to be the only ones editing it. That's crazy. If I gave you a passage, you would notice if you didn't leave enough space between a word. Right. You have this, once again, automatic editing going on. And we need to help our kids develop that too. Yes. That's the other piece of it. Right. Okay. Are we doing okay on time?
Yeah, we're getting there. We have like 8 or 10 minutes left.
Okay. So the next strategy is that you anchor the verbal concepts. So if I talk to you about memory, you have a little bit of an anchor about that. If we talk about handwriting, you have somewhat of an anchor about that in your vocabulary, right? So I use strategies to anchor some concepts with kids. This would be a place where it's important to talk about what's intentional copywork, because a verbal concept has a lot to do with vocabulary. And what we know about vocabulary is the best place to learn it is in reading. Okay. Kids gain their most vocabulary through reading, so that's a problem if kids are struggling with reading. And we also know it takes about 20 hits on a word to make it part of your vocabulary. Okay, I've selected a book. I'm sharing this book with my child. The writer has chosen some great word that I want my child to notice. I pre-teach. We read it together. I've brought attention to it. He reads it. He or she does copywork. We do some editing together. Review it again. Dictation. We do maybe some editing again. First of all, you got a week's worth of language arts in there, just so you know, on this one copywork passage. Yep. That's what we're going to talk about at the retreat. But do you see how many hits just happened there? And if you're reading the book too, the writer's likely to use that word again. Yes. And you have a hyper awareness of it. So guess what? I'm using that word during dinner. Right? Yeah. So you can see where you've started to build in some concepts. This is where I talk about this little idea about cops. I talk about it elsewhere too, but you'll see. You can Google image the word cops editing and this will come up. Now, the whole point of this is just to create an acronym that kids remember. But an early writer needs to work on capitalization. The O stands for organization, and that doesn't mean the kind of organization that you have when you're putting ideas together. That's organization like indentation and space between words. Okay, it's pretty simple stuff. Punctuation and spelling. okay? And they're looking, did the word I write look like the word that, was it spelled the same as the word that was on the passage? So you can use these kind of anchors. We do our copy work the same way all the time. We edit afterwards. All of that really helps facilitate better consolidation of information. Lighten the load, free up space, okay? This has a lot to do with understanding what your child needs. So someone mentioned that they use the wand. In the wand, we go through and we highlight all the punctuation points, right?
Right.
Every punctuation mark is highlighted. Why? Well, now you don't have to hold that. Your eyes come to that. You've had some pre-teaching. I've activated short-term memory.
Yes.
The highlighting is there. That activates my attention, right? Those are the kinds of things that happen when we go through a task like that. We're freeing up space. So let's go back to the child who is so good at this, it doesn't look like they need it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I used to have this thing that I would do with my kids. This kind of goes back to the verbal concepts too. Is we'd read a passage and I'd say, "What's going on there?" And they'd say, "That's foreshadowing." Like foreshadowing. That's an onomatopoeia. I mean, even my little kids are saying, "That's an onomatopoeia." Like we're finding that stuff all the time. So then they would write, and my one daughter had some handwriting difficulty, but my other one, was Miss Perfect. Everything was done perfectly, not an error. If she would be the kind of kid that you'd say, "Why is she doing
it right?"
But they would finish and they'd say, "I really like the way the writer said this," or "I thought that was interesting that they picked that word. I would have not said it that way." Like there's this depth that comes because everything else is automatic.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
So that's part of what's really important. If they're overloaded, we got to lighten the load.
Yes.
Right? You work
so
to
they
a
can
level
make those
of
connections.
Success. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, say that again. Work to their level of success.
Work to their level of success. That's what it's all about.
Awesome.
If they're drowning, they're not learning.
Right.
And you know what? And don't we all like to do the things we're good at? And we do not like to do the things we are not good at.
That's right.
We do. And, we learn more from the things we're good at. We truly do learn more out of our
strengths. Yes.
Our failings, you might learn a little bit from it. And yes, there's always lessons there. But our strengths teach us a lot.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
We went through all 5.
Oh my gosh, we got through all 5. So in case you missed it, download the free 5 tips. So the tips she just gave are written in short form with some little A-B kind of points for you. And you can just sign up and it will be emailed to you. And if you have problems, just email me and I will help you. So before we go, we did well. We're just under an hour, which seems to be my typical threshold here. That was a lot of content.
That was a lot. Oh, one of the
and this is one of Rita's, strengths and habits.
Just to overload.
She's a volume teacher. And so sometimes I come away and I'm like, okay, I have to think about this because, she swims in the stream of all of this information. And, we call it the diva ring light. It has nothing to do with our complexions.
Right.
It's a light. Right. But what I was going to say is what I always find comforting initially when I'm with Rita is that the part of me that has intuition gets reinforced by the research.
Exactly.
And so why I wanted to bring her into Periscope and share with you is you've heard me now for 8 weeks give a lot of talks that are more feely, touchy, emotional, intuition, experience, subjective. But brain research backs it up. Like I did 2 scopes on brain research, and how much I value that. But Rita actually lives it. I mean, she has her master's in this field. She's worked it for 30 years. So we actually have some credibility to stand on. And what's missing in a lot of our homeschools isn't the right tools or even the right philosophy. It's just knowing what the practices are around those things that creates the kind of learning you're looking for. So we could say all day long, go ahead and do copy work, and it could produce nothing because your kids are just sort of bored and they're just scrawling across the page.
Pre-teach it, it's not very
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But if we follow sort of Rita's model, the model I laid out, Charlotte Mason, Ruth Beechick, they all have this same approach. You talk about the passage. You pay attention to punctuation. You say things like, what happens when I run into that little comma? Let me read it without a comma. Let me read it with the comma. And you tell me the difference between the two ways this sentence sounds. Why do you think we put it in? So you do a little bit of that, like, what do you call that? Socratic method? I mean, it's investigative, it's inductive, as opposed to, you know, here's a lesson plan with 5 sentences of commas, and you just sort of scrawl them across the page.
And we call it explicit teaching.
Oh,
you know,
thank you.
As opposed to the implicit, here's a passage, I'm going to go, you know, go do this and teach your brother while you write this passage, is not same as this explicit teaching. Yeah, not that I don't understand that, because I really do. But, you know, if you have kids that are can work on some of the same passages, and you can sit down together and really talk about what's there and have them read it, and, you know, that it's such a difference. And we call that explicit teaching.
It is a difference, and you can work in groups. You can use one passage and use a very short version of it for your youngest child, and use the 4 or 5 sentence version of it for your older children, and you can focus on them as a group. You can do a little bit independently. You know, when we did dictation, I always made sure that they studied the passage right before dictation.
Absolutely.
And I have families who think that's cheating. And I'm like, no, it's driven toward success.
Bad.
Yes,
someone's saying they're feeling like they're doing it all wrong.
Oh, no.
This is not about,
no.
This is about the new start. This is about thinking about, wow, there's a lot here.
Yes.
Now that I know it, I'm going to look at it differently. That's really my goal. Honestly.
That's totally it. And if you've been doing copywork at all, you're already getting some benefit. It's natural. But now we're just giving you some more ways to think about it. Okay, let's see. If a 10-year-old reads at 3rd grade level, should she do copywork at that level?
If I would say that the copywork really, because you really want kids to be working at this level of success, should really be at a level of a passage that they could read. Okay.
Good.
Now, does that mean that once in a while there might not be a word there that we talk about, that we teach? This is this word. It's, you know, hard to read. You know, neighborhood or something.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So yes, enough. Oh, there's a good one. Enough. Right. Okay. So sure, it's going to have that word. You're going to work on it, but you want to prep them, make sure they can read it. And there's so much research right now about writing and about how writing it improves reading. Not just reading improves writing.
Totally.
And how even teaching spelling explicitly and practicing it in writing really improves reading, which is, you know, interesting because people used to only think of that as the other way around.
Yeah.
So have the word enough, and I'm using it in copywork, and we've analyzed, and she's written enough, and now she sees that word in reading, and she's had experience with that word, and she's reading enough. She's not skipping over it while no one's looking, that. Right?
Yes, I love that. Oh, this is awesome. Look at you. Let's see. Yeah, so they're talking about some kids who have various learning issues, and they are reading at a higher level, but they're doing their copy work just a step down, and that's successful. So I think that makes sense.
Right, and that's the other thing. Oh, so what I was starting to say about this writing is, you know, my son, when he read a Bob book, we wrote. That was our copy work.
Yes.
That was the sat, period.
Yes.
Capital, period. Oh my goodness, there's your copy work. Like, it needs to be wherever that child is at. And sometimes, as the more advanced student, may do a copywork passage on some science concept they're trying to figure out.
Yes.
That's okay. And they may not totally have the whole process there, but can they read it? That's one of the things I want to know.
And that's actually what someone just asked. She said, what about a child who is reading at a level that is beyond their comprehension? So they're really good at reading, but they're not able to process it.
Right.
What would you say to that?
Being hyperlexic. And that is a big issue, actually. And you really want to work at the level of comprehension.
Okay.
Because what you don't want is a continuation of not comprehending.
Okay.
That's really, you know, when you think about it, this whole language by mouth, ear, eye, hand, right? All of them eventually inform each other right? So
Right.
I read and I gain a concept through reading.
Yes.
And I think I understand a concept, but then I have to do a written narration on it, and guess what? I didn't understand it as well as I thought, right? Or I know I'm going to talk at a Periscope, and guess what? When I actually say it out loud instead of just in my head, that sounded stupid. I don't want to say it that way, right?
Yeah.
There's all that kind of information that we get from all these different processes. So you don't want to be ignoring that comprehension piece. It's really, really
important.
Yeah, right.
There's been several questions now about handwriting for kids who flip their letters or kids who really don't enjoy the handwriting piece. How do you help them? So you want to talk about handwriting a little bit?
So one thing I want to tell you is the handwriting is really related to this phonological loop.
Okay.
And I also have to tell you that the kind of research, how are we doing?
We're good.
The kind of research that's been going on, the reason all of a sudden you feel like you're hearing so much more about dyslexia and dysgraphia is in part because some of us are doing a better job of getting information out there. But a big part of it is the type of technology that's out there now. We have these things called functional MRIs right around the year 2000, 2003, that these MRIs were developed where you're not exposed to high levels of radiation, you're not exposed to radiation, and you can be doing a task. And what they measure is blood flow to these different areas of the brain. All of a sudden, this thing that we called dyslexia, dysgraphia, it's being looked at as in comparison to average readers and writers. Okay? And we know that it's real. We know that kids are struggling because they have weaknesses in these certain areas. Okay? So here's about letter reversals. Kids come to the task of learning letters a lot like learning words. And when your kids first, we had a dog in our house, or we had a cat at the time, and then we got a dog later. Okay, we had a cat. So the first word for a four-legged animal was kitty, right?
Yeah.
Kitty. So you drive by a cow, kitty.
Okay.
It's this overgeneralization that happens. And then my kids began to learn, oh, there's a kitty, and there's a doggy, and there's a cow, and then we go to the zoo, and there's an elephant, and all of that, right? But that overgeneralization is very common in developing language. True of letters. You learn these things. They're called letters. Oh, these are letters. Well, I can kind of put them down any old way. It's a letter. I haven't yet sorted out the meaning behind each one.
Oh,
the concept of B is B.
Yes.
And the concept of D is D.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if my loop system is weak, and now we're talking exceptionally weak.
Yeah.
To the level that we're now looking at what is dyslexia or what is dysgraphia, I'm not going to clean up those reversals the way other kids do.
I see.
Okay? So everybody does some reversals. That's part of the process of
learning to
Just
write the
like
letters.
all kids overgeneralize some words and
or they misapply a grammar principle and they use
100 things.
Right,
Yeah, we
right.
all do.
We all do that while we're growing.
It's this difficulty working through that and sorting through that is one of your indicators that you probably want to go get some support. Okay. So it makes a difference. So here's what we know about handwriting. If you have handwriting difficulties, the new writer is getting blood flow to the phonological area and, visual area. Of course, that's what we think. Guess what? Once it hits automatic, it's all phonological.
Wow.
So what's missing? That phonological piece. So I take kids who are having trouble with B, and we do a lot of B.
Bringing those together.
Am I writing this in a way that...
it's actually the opposite.
Right.
Isn't that funny?
You were making D's, right? Saying B's. Right. Don't do that. That will confuse them. But we do a lot of that. I need them to say the sounds. They have got, it doesn't have meaning if there's no sounds. Otherwise, it's like this. I see Julie. This is Julie. This is still Julie. Everything else in life, it doesn't matter if it's right or left.
Oh, that's so true.
That's Julie, whether it's right or left.
Wow, what a great point.
But BD, it matters. Okay.
No, that's awesome. Is there a grade point difference between between compression and reading that determines hyperlexia. I don't know what that means exactly.
So bringing the P down to the line. Oh, yeah. Okay. So one of the things I do, and I think we talk about this in the wand, is we draw the bottom line in green. That's the grass. And there are some letters that go underground.
Yes, right?
Now, do I spend a lot of time saying underground? Underground? No. We might talk about that's how you make it. But I'm not doing P's again. I'm doing Q's.
That's okay.
But when we make our P's and practice them, we might say P, P, P.
Because that's what you want them to associate it with. And I remember that with Liam. So Liam is dysgraphic, and he worked with Rita. And one of the things that he wasn't doing is associating sound with his writing. He was storing the spelling in his head.
It was amazing.
And
he was brilliant, actually, the way he was doing it.
And he was literally consulting the image in his brain letter by letter. So it's like almost like his eyes would look up and then they would look down and he'd put a letter.
And you see that in Copywork. When kids are writing letter by letter, in my foundations class, one of the first things I have parents look at is your kid writing letter by letter?
Yeah.
Okay?
Rather than going, house... And bringing those. And so I remember when we did the therapies at home, I had to hear his voice. He wasn't allowed to copy in silence. He had to make the sounds of the letters as he was writing them. And that was a turning point for him.
And guess what? Your children who have very strong phonological systems, if you ask them to talk while they do copywork, they'll be like, well, okay.
Okay.
Fine. This isn't hard. Why am I doing this? I do it in my head. What does it matter? Right? If you ask the child who's struggling to do it, they will resist because it's interfering.
With their system.
With their system.
That's
and you
right.
think, oh my gosh, how can that interfere?
Point.
But it does because they're not consolidating that information.
Yeah.
They're not activating that system that needs
And so
we're getting into what is dyslexia, but
but that I know that people care about that. And what you want to know, as somebody else then just asked about that gap between like a second grade reader and fourth grade comprehension or whatever, what do you do about that gap? So some of this gets technical, it's going to be specific to your child and maybe would benefit from somebody who could actually talk to you about that child. Because like without knowing your kid, Rita's information, it has to be more general. But can you just talk about real quick, we'll do this for 2 more minutes and then we're going to close up because we've been on a long time. But how do you know when you need to get an evaluation?
Well, it's a good question. One thing I would say is if you're hitting a level of frustration and it's really having its emotional impact, then I think you should start to consult and get some help, because I just feel like then you're kind of heading down an emotional path you might not want to be on. So first of all, that's, and in general, when you have kids that are really resistive, sometimes it might just be behavior, but mostly they resist the things that are difficult for them.
Right.
And sometimes we know that certain strategies really work well and some strategies do not work well. And it's really important to get someone who knows,
Right.
I'll say to parents all the time, don't use that reading program anymore. We're going to use this one.
Right.
It's important. There are certain strategies that are known to tap into the right systems, and a lot of it has to do with, again, this is all about language, about really tapping into that phonological system. So, for example, I don't like it when people spell dog, D-O-G, dog. What are you going to do? Every time you get to dog, say D-O-G? It's like I can't spell Mississippi unless I say M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I, because that's the way I learned it. I can't sound out that word.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing, first we're going to go through Mississippi, right?
You actually have to stop what you're doing to spell it. Oh my gosh, I've never thought about it, but that's so true.
It's so true. And then you're like, what was I saying about Mississippi? Oh yeah.
Right.
Because it's completely interfered.
You've learned it in a way that isn't conducive to your flow.
Well, not only that, what are you going to do? It's like you memorizing hundreds of phone numbers. Is that helpful?
Oh my gosh, and I can't do it.
And that's what happens when we have kids just say letter names. How is that helpful? That doesn't translate.
No, or it's also like learning the alphabet through capital letters when the majority of reading is lowercase.
Yes.
And I remember when I was first told that, fortunately it was when Noah was young, and I immediately got rid of all of our capital letter cards and I went and bought lowercase because I realized, oh my gosh, that is how they're learning to read. And here we memorize this big system first. You know, the first thing is what you remember best. It's like I learned piano, treble, and bass clef at the same time. So to me, they were interchangeable. But people who learn only treble clef, like for the horn or the flute or some other thing,
Right.
when they have to learn bass clef, it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an example of what's going on. Anyway, we are kind of at the end. Look at all these hearts. One of the comments that someone asked was, will you be back on Periscope again?
I would love to.
She will.
I'm trying to work on looking at the right
Yeah,
spot
you're doing
anyway.
great. And we'll make sure that we stay both theoretical and practical. So for those who did not see it, free 5 tips, bravewriter.com, Copywork, pick that up from Rita. We had a really fun time with you guys today.
Thank you.
Thanks for
It's
coming.
Like a great group. I love
Oh,
it.
no, they're awesome.
Yeah,
They're the best. And, hey, we're going to have a hug. This is like,
we love each other.
we do. She's awesome.
She's taught me so much.
Oh,
I share
vice
things with
versa.
her.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
great.
No, absolutely. So at the retreat, Rita will be there. Tell them real quick about the half-hour sessions.
Okay, so we're gonna be. I already told you we're gonna be talking about copywork and really creating some lessons together, like literally creating them together. And then I'm gonna make myself available for exactly some of these precise kinds of issues. For half-hour sessions, we can sit down, we can talk directly about exactly what's going on with your student. Do I have specific suggestions for you for tomorrow? Do I think there's an issue here? Maybe you have an evaluation in hand and you want to know, are you on the right track? Maybe, everything's great, but you feel like something's missing. Some of these questions about, how much of a gap is an okay gap, those kinds of issues, instead of one by one here. We're going to set up some half-hour time slots where you can sign up and we'll just sit down together and we'll talk about your child.
Exactly. And those will be an extra fee, just so you know. But it's a really great opportunity to talk to a homeschooler who is also a specialist. Because we all know, some of us have been to school districts where that concept is challenging. And not every specialist has an appreciation for what you can do at home and how faithful you'll be to doing it, right? That's also a benefit.
I love my homeschool
Yes.
families
Okay, so
with.
I'm going to just remind you real quick. We have a Facebook group, facebook.com/groups, Bravescopes, to continue these conversations. And the retreat information is up on the Brave Writer homepage. Just scroll down, click on the link, and you'll see all the information you need.
And I have a Facebook page.
Yes.
Rita Cevasco. You have it there?
I don't.
And I do have a website. There's not a lot on it now, but I'm working toward a blog that should be coming in 2016, but it's ritaspeak.com.
ritaspeak.com. We will put all of this in the Bravescopes Facebook group so everybody knows about it, and I will also add it to the download page so that you have the notes about where you can find Rita. Okay, so this is how we close all of my Periscopes.
Okay.
Ready, you guys? Live honestly, write bravely. I'm Julie Bogart. This is Rita Cevasco. Thanks for being with us today, and I will see you sometime this weekend. Have a
Bye.
great night.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys.